Hi, everyone, and thanks for listening. This is the Collective Health and Wellness Podcast with Eamon and Cat. We have a team of fitness and wellness coaches dedicated to helping you become a healthier, more productive version of yourself. Our mission is to provide you with information and opportunities to maintain a healthy lifestyle forever. Join us as we dive into our 4 pillars of health and wellness and give you ways to incorporate healthy, sustainable habits to last a lifetime. So hello, everyone. We are here at Collective Health and Wellness. I'm here with Eamon. How are you?
Great.
Good. We're getting ready for the holidays here. We're a few days before Christmas, a week or two before the new year. And I thought we would talk a little bit about goal setting and starting the year with intention, right? The new year's coming up and you have this phrase that you like to say, set it and forget it.
Yeah. So I think, the new year is a time that people like to, new year, new me it. And they like to kind of like, there's this like super positive outlook for the entirety of the year, right? Like I have this goal I want to accomplish. Well, within 6 weeks, usually after you set a goal to be new year, you've already like, you're like too far down the hole as far as like what the steps you needed to take to achieve that goal, right? One of the reasons I like to use the phrase set it and forget it or something along those lines is that, it's good to have that goal, right? It's good to have this big, scary thing that you want to accomplish for the year, whether it's in your professional life, your personal life, your fitness, your nutrition, your sleep, any of those things. It's good to have goals in each of these realms. But after you have that goal, you need to kind of like maybe write it down and put it away somewhere, right? From there, your focus shouldn't be on that big goal. It shouldn't be on accomplishing this thing that you have set out to do for the year. It should be on the daily, weekly, and monthly tasks that you need to do in order to move forward towards that goal.
I like that. Let's make that real for some people. So
sure.
Let's assume that my goal for next fall is I want to complete a triathlon.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit in the context of what you just described and how I would sort of break that down. And I guess the triathlon would be that big scary thing that I put away, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I think we're gonna just draw some assumptions here just to kind of like move the conversation along a little bit. I'm gonna assume that you already know how to swim. I'm gonna assume you already know how to run. I'm gonna assume that you know how to bike, right? So those are assumptions.
You're making lots of assumptions, but yes, for the purpose of this exercise.
For the purpose of this exercise, I think those are 3 fair assumptions that you've set as far as like wanting to run a triathlon, or even a 5K, anything that like, whatever your goal is. But for the sake of running a triathlon, I think you need to look at what a number of things, right? And all of those things align with our 4 pillars, right?
Yep.
Your daily goal should be, whatever nutrition protocol you're going to follow to eat whole and nutritious foods at least 80% of the time, right? Staying away from the processed stuff, staying away from high sugar stuff and things like that. That will help align your intention with your goal, right? From there, we need to look at the movement side of things, right? And maybe your movement thing is a weekly goal of the number of miles or however many sessions you want to get in for that goal of, racing a triathlon. You're going to need to spend time every week in the pool or in open water if you're lucky enough to live near open water at this time of year and it's nice. You need to spend time every week putting some miles in on your shoes and putting some miles in on your bike. Personally, if I were going to be running a triathlon, I would also include some strength training sessions. And that doesn't necessarily mean working up to 1 rep maxes or anything like that. That could also just be some accessory work that goes along with strengthening my joints. Because a triathlon, if we're talking about the whole race, you're looking at 146 and a half miles. That's a lot of time doing that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that is the movement intention, and that's like a weekly intention or a monthly intention of, it's probably easier to eat the elephant in smaller bites. So I would say a weekly intention.
Mm-hmm. Just getting that volume in, right?
Yeah. Getting the miles in. So we've covered nutrition, we've covered movement. The next piece is going to be your sleep, right? We'll go down this path with sleep in another podcast because I have a lot of information about sleep. That was actually what today's podcast is supposed to be about, but I figured, since we're close to the new year, we might as well talk about intention setting. But you can set your habits up to supercharge your sleep. There's a lot of like biohacking we can do as it relates to sleep, as far as like room temperature and hot and cold therapy and blackout curtains and removing blue lights. That works, right?
Like the weighted blanket. Yeah.
Yep. Weighted blankets is another good one. But there's so many things you can do. But in order to really say you're not going to do any of that stuff, right? Say you're not going to remove, you're not going to have blackout curtains. You're not going to have weighted blankets. You're not going to change the temperature of your house because of whatever at night when you're sleeping. In order to kind of maximize your sleep, it's that 6 to 8 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we want to edge ourselves towards a 7 to 8 hour time frame as far as sleep is concerned. But that is setting a daily habit of, hey, I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night, and then I'm going to wake up the next day at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning to get that 7 or 8 hours of sleep, right? And people need to realize that even if you go to bed at 10 o'clock and you wake up at 6, that doesn't necessarily mean you got 8 full hours of sleep, because your sleep cycle kind of goes through it. And typically end up with about 40 minutes to an hour less of actual time in bed in your sleep time. And keeping track of that stuff, right? So that's also important. And the last piece is the mental health or the mental wellness side of things. And this is a part that is just like sleep, people don't consider a lot because they're like, I'm good. I don't need a therapist. I don't need this. I don't need that. But that's not only what mental wellness is about. It's also about your mindset and making sure that when you're looking at these intentions, if you get off track, being able to jump right back in where you had left off. Like your mindset, if you're going through training for a triathlon, you're getting the miles in, you're eating well, you're sleeping well, but your mindset is saying, man, this is really hard. I don't want to do this anymore. All these things, this is hard. You need a reset at that point, right? And being able to like go in and be like, okay, this is the day that I'm going to take a reset. I'm going to shut everything off for the day. I'm not going to move that day. I'm going to eat and drink whatever I want and, sleep, maybe you'll get less sleep or whatever, but being able to jump right back in and having that positive mindset as to like, yes, I still want to achieve this goal. That's an important thing, right? So it's not only about like talk therapy and journaling. It's also about, strengthening your mindset and, digging in when you have to and knowing when to step off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, I like that reset too. The other thing I think about with mental resilience is sometimes if I were to get off track. So let's say I went a week and I didn't sleep very well and I didn't eat whole foods and I skipped 3 training sessions. I might be apt to sort of, that's a slippery slope, right? And now, and then the next week I'm doing even less. And then before I know it, I am nowhere near where I need to be in terms of tracking to that long-term goal. So I feel like there's another aspect of that mental resilience where you can sort of, I don't want to say snap out of it, but be okay with just accepting where you are and forgiving yourself, for any kind of missteps and just getting right back onto it and not saying like, oh, well, I'll start Monday, or how do you, what are some things that you might suggest to help us sort of overcome that hurdle?
That's it really depends on the narrative that you have in your head as it relates to the goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aligning your intentions with your goal makes it a lot easier to stay on track. But if you do happen to find yourself off track, remembering a phrase that's something I use often is it's not what happens to you, it's your response to what happens to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So life's going to happen, right? Over the holidays, I tend to miss a training session or two. And, being okay with that and being like, that's all right. You missed a training session. We're not going to double down and do 2 training sessions in one day, but we're going to jump right back into where we were and pick up where we left off. And not feel guilty about that. Right. We talked a little bit about guilt in one of our newsletters not long ago, or that was our second podcast, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Yeah. And like, guilt's a strong motivator, but it's a strong motivator usually in the negative aspect, not in the positive aspect.
Right.
So being okay with your, if you miss a training session, if your sleep is crap for a week, if you eat 10 cookies before you have dinner on Christmas, that's not an indication of who you are as a person, right? That is just yeah, I did that. I enjoyed it, right? And now I'm going to get right back into whatever my intention is, because if I continue down this slippery slope, it's going to eat up into that goal, right?
Yeah.
So
I also liked how you talked about the doubling down part, because I hadn't thought about that, but I feel like, especially in nutrition, a lot of people do that, where you say you missed a session, so the next day you're going to do 2 sessions. I find that a lot of my nutrition clients, if they are bad one day, which I try to train them not to say that they're bad, they were maybe overindulgent or something like that, that they'll starve themselves the next day. Right. And that's sort of the same thing as what you were talking about with doubling down. Like, you don't have to overcompensate for a misstep. You just need to get back onto the steps that you need to take that are driving those intentions and goals.
Yeah. And we can use the same example with both nutrition and exercise. If you have somebody that's overindulgent one day, say for Christmas or New Year's, right? And then they do some caloric restriction the next day, metabolically, that actually does the exact opposite of what you want it to do.
Yeah.
It forces your body into a food storage mode.
Like a tailspin.
You end up storing more fat. Yeah, it's a total tailspin. And the same thing happens with exercise, right? If I get 2 sessions in a day because I missed the session the day before, and that's not my normal training volume, that's gonna have a much larger effect on my sleep.
Central nervous
that's
system,
gonna have,
and
your CNS gets thrown in the crapper. Typically, if you pick up an additional training session, you're not fueling for that appropriately. And like, we can go down this path, like the metabolic pathways and the endocrine system are super interesting to me, because it literally controls everything that we do. But when we double down on that stuff, it might have that immediate effect of like, oh, okay, I got that out of the way. And like, I feel better about that portion of it, that it's like I checked the box or whatever. But the metabolic effect of checking that box is a lot more deep than just like checking that box, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. Totally.
Yep. Yeah. So, I think now let's talk a little bit about, like, say it happens for a week, right? Say you're off track with everything for a week and you're just in this total tailspin.
I've done that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Where it's like, all right, the goal is out the window, right? We talked a little bit in one of the newsletters about the Kaizen approach of like process improvement, right? Mm-hmm. And the Kaizen approach of process improvement can be used in this sense as well, right? At that point, we just need to look at what the whole picture is. We need to look at what the goal is, and then just kind of like backtrack a little bit as far as what our intentions are, right? And that doesn't mean adding in extra sessions, but what that might mean is, realigning our intentions to the goal as opposed to this longer pathway that we had, right? So being able to adjust, not necessarily on the fly, but like to really like take a step back and get that 10,000 square foot view, versus when you're doing intentions, you're looking at that section of whatever time you're at, right? But being able to step back, yeah, exactly. And to me, that's way easier to accomplish a goal. It's way easier to stay on track if we're just looking at these small, bite-sized chunks of the elephant versus trying to eat the whole elephant, right?
Yeah.
Is that we look at these small intentions, but we need to be able to step back every once in a while and see where we're at with the whole picture, and then dial right back into that 10 square foot view versus the 10,000 square foot view. And if we get off track for a week, being able to step back and like kind of slow down and be like, okay, how can I adjust this? And then adjusting it to still get us to that final goal, whatever that final goal is. Maybe it means that we're moving that goal from, with a triathlon, typically there's a date, but like we're moving that goal from, I wanted to do this in September, to now saying, okay, I'm going to do this in the end of September or whatever, right. Just shifting that timeline a little bit. Or maybe it means you need to look at your training volume, and maybe you do need to add in a little bit more volume, not more days, but like maybe one day you were only supposed to run 5 miles. And you're like, well, I got to run 6 that day, and that's okay.
Yeah. And
kind of ramping up the speed or the training volume as it equates to that.
And then maybe even just
anything.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, for anything. And maybe even you take that goal and you just make it a little bit smaller, right? Like you talked about the elephant. Maybe it's not an elephant, maybe it's a tiger, right? So maybe it's a sprint try, or something like that, depending on how far off you are. And again, this is all just a metaphor, right, for any goal that you might have. But I like the fact that we talked about sort of changing the time frame, changing the size of the goal, or the dimensions of the end state, or adjusting sort of the volume up to it so that you can still achieve it, but you change the plan a little bit. So
yeah, and like you mentioned, you can take this and apply it to anything, right? Say with the folks over at Priority Life Care, say you are working in a role that has the ability to vertically move, right? Well, maybe that requires some classes. Maybe that requires some on-the-job training. Maybe that requires something along those lines, certifications or anything like that. And so having that big picture, the big certification, or the not the certification, but the desire to move up in the company in a vertical sense, and being able to break that down and really look at the process in order to get there, and then have the intention of completing these chunks of the process, right?
Yeah.
They do that in college. I mean, we can go down a path of what the modern American education system actually is, but not a great place to be for a lot of people.
No.
But it's I have a degree in business, right? And I had to start with accounting 101. But by the time I got through grad school, I'm taking graduate level accounting. And it's because it's like, I've taken these small pieces and moved up along the way, and my grades didn't change. I was a C student in accounting in the beginning. I was a C student in accounting at the end, and I knew that was where I was going to be, but I finished it, right? So, I think being able to break things down and look at it on a daily, a weekly, and a monthly basis, and have like specific goals for those, or specific intentions for those timeframes, enables us to kind of like keep the wheels churning and moving in the same direction. And it's easier if you do get off track. It's easier to look at getting off track with one of your daily intentions and then just jumping right back into it the next day, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have this big goal versus an intention, and you get off track, it's like, all right, well, I'll figure out a time to pick it back up, and I'll figure out a time to pick it back up. Next thing you know, you're 2 months down the road, and now you have to like kind of scrap that goal and redo the whole process again. So smaller bite-sized pieces, helps you get there a little bit faster.
Yeah. And it's really habits too, right? It's like building daily habits, kind of like what we talk about with everything. I equate it to sometimes if, when I think about people, especially this time of year, you're racking up a lot of expenses for the holidays, right? You're spending probably more money than you have, maybe putting it on a credit card or something like that and thinking, all right, I got $5,000 on this credit card that I need to pay off in, 8 months. How am I going to do that? Same thing. You chunk it down into little bite-sized pieces where, instead of going out to dinner 3 times a week, we go out to dinner once a week. We pay ourselves before we, pay other things. And, we're increasing that monthly payment by a certain amount so that by the end of the, 8 months, it's all paid off. And those are, again, it's just another real world example of how you take those intentions. And then that becomes a habit, right? And then maybe now I'm a little more fiscally responsible going forward too, because I've, ramped down some of my entertainment activities that, maybe aren't worth the spend.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Good stuff.
So yeah,
like it.
So check out the newsletter for this week. If you aren't a employee at Priority Life Care, just reach out to us. Kat will probably include our email addresses in the show notes. Reach out to us, and I can have the newsletter sent out to you if you want to take a look at that for your company. And we'd love to start incorporating more companies in here. So
and if you have a big scary goal that you want to put down in the comments on YouTube, and if you want our help in having you chunk that out into little bite-sized pieces, we'd be happy to help you out with that as well.
Absolutely.
All right, so happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all that good stuff. Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
See you guys in the new year.